Good stuff. Hello, welcome. It's November 28th, 2023, and here we are in the Great Issue Academy Talk Tuesdays. Today, we're going to be talking about a really important topic. This is a series that we're doing on somatic experiencing and the importance in so many different areas of our life. We've been really focusing on it in the aspect of self-love. And today we're going to talk specifically about the relationship between somatic experiencing and trauma. And so I'm excited to dive into this topic. I'd love to get your interactions as we're going through. We can use the chat or unmute and really start to understand what trauma is, how it affects the body, and then how somatic experiencing can help heal those wounds and allow us to create something new, get beyond our traumas and the stories that it causes us to create and then live from. So let's start with just a really basic understanding of what trauma is. Okay, a lot of people come to us and they say, well, I didn't have it so bad. Right. And that this is a lot of people in the population who believe that in order to have a traumatic event in your life, you have to have been a victim or witness of horrific abuse, or it has to be, lived through a horrible accident or a natural disaster, or, you've been in a war zone, things of that nature. And while those kinds of catastrophic events can and do often usually create a trauma is certainly not limited to those kinds of things. You've probably heard us speak to, the types of life events and circumstances that can be traumatic. But I think one of the most important things for you to understand is that trauma is not one thing. We don't have a list of here are all the things that qualify as a trauma, right? What we do know is that trauma is anything that overwhelms the individual system at the time that it occurs. So it could literally be something as simple as being scared, right? It could be something like not getting your needs met enough of the time. That's your physical needs, your emotional needs, right? And so many of us, we were raised by people who were doing their best with the knowledge that they had, with the skill set, with their own past traumas, and they would have probably loved to do a better job. But the fact is, a lot of us grew up in situations that were not as nurturing and helpful as they could have been. And that's not to play victim. It's not to blame anybody else. But if we want to heal from trauma, we first have to understand what it is and to what extent we may have experienced events that were overwhelming to our individual nervous system. So with that as a starting point, right, we can start to understand the other piece of trauma, which is it's not the event itself. It's actually what occurs in your body as a result of the event or series of events and is then carried forward. And there's a couple different ways that we can look at this. And we could first of all look at the nervous system itself. And our nervous systems are so incredible. They are really, truly these masterful machines that are geared towards helping us survive, helping us to protect ourselves, right? And these are really important things. When we were hunters and gatherers, literally everyday life was life-threatening, right? So we needed those nervous systems programmed the way they are, designed to make sure that we knew what was dangerous and would take the action to protect ourselves. So our nervous systems, whenever we experience something that is overwhelming to the system, right, we essentially shut down to the experience of what's happening, right? We may go through a phase that's that sympathetic fight or flight, where we, get a lot of adrenaline and prepare ourselves to run away or to fight, right? But after that point, or if we see, hey, that's not going to work for us, or it hasn't worked in the past, I don't have the physical strength, I don't have the resources to be able to fight or flee, then we're going to go into what's known as the freeze response. And the freeze response is basically a shutdown, and it's really brilliant when we don't have the option to fight or flee. But it causes us to, rather than metabolize and process what's happening to us in the moment because it's too much, it causes us to just push it down, hold it inside, and not actually experience it in the fullness of the experience itself. And our nervous system is then forever changed, which if we were talking about, let's say we were talking about being attacked by a wild animal. Okay, we're hunters and gatherers. We get attacked by a wild animal and our system is overwhelmed, and we hold that experience within us. Now, this is a really good idea, because every time we leave our tent to go out and hunt for food, we're going to have that experience within us, and our nervous system is going to be activated. So we're going to be on high alert. We're going to be looking for the animal. We're going to remember, oh, it jumped out of the bushes. Okay, every time I come up to a bush, I'm going to be really hyper vigilant. I'm going to be hyper aware, right? Brilliant. It's a great system. Except, right, when we're not talking about that kind of situation, right? And we're talking about in our everyday lives, and the situation is not actually life-threatening. Instead, we're afraid of, you know, the kinds of things in our life that are pretty regular events. But we feel like, right, there's something life-threatening. And so we spend a lot of time with hypervigilant nervous systems that keep us in survival mode, when in reality, there isn't any real life-threatening events going on or, you know, impacting us. And so that's where we can start to talk about and explore the idea that if these events have essentially become stuck in our bodies, if these events are informing my nervous system, the state of my nervous system day in and day out, and I'm finding it limiting in my life, then how do I heal those things? How do I process those old traumas so that I'm no longer, you know, afraid to go out, afraid to walk by bushes because I'm afraid of what might happen again, right? And that's where our somatic experiencing practice can come in. And before we kind of switch over and start talking about what to do, I would just want to check in and see if this definition of trauma and this understanding of trauma makes sense to you guys. Maybe it's a little bit of a different perspective on trauma than you have explored or thought about in the
What was the term you used? The numb effect?
Yeah, so probably shut down.
The numbness.
Yeah, the numbness, the overwhelm, the shutdown, the freeze, these are all synonymous. But it's that state that we come in when there's been either so much threat day after day, or there has been you know, situations where we know we can't fight or flee. And so it's not an option. And so our
And that,
system very wisely kind of disassociates from it, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that the numbness can lead to disassociation.
Yeah, yeah,
And that disassociation, the problem with that is it takes us away from the bad feelings, but it also prevents us from being able to love, because we just shut down everything.
yeah, because it's the same area of the brain. It's the premedial cortex. And when we shut down to the bad things, it's like, oh, what a brilliant idea, right? But you're right, it shuts us down to the aliveness, the joys, the love, the
Yep.
things that make us human, right? And so when we look at, well, why is this so important, right? That's one of the big reasons, because we can't experience ourselves. We can't experience the fullness of life if we have shut down part of us, right? We'll also go through life feeling, like I said, you know, hyper vigilant and hyper aware, creeping around every bush, hoping, you know, the tiger's not going to come from there. This greatly impacts our health. I've mentioned several times here in this group the work of Gabor Mate and his books really explore the connection between trauma and our stuck emotions and disease. And it is, certainly very well known that these two things are highly correlated. Disease, inflammation, all of our chronic illnesses and our mental health are all hugely impacted by trauma and how we've been able to process it and regain our capacity for life, our capacity for living. There's a lot of things that happen when we experience trauma. I was focusing here on the nervous system, but we could also look at, from a neurological standpoint in our brains. When we experience trauma and we're living in survival mode, right? Because survival, our limbic system or our survival system is triggered. And that system is very different from our higher brain functioning, right? That's kind of like our primitive system that's really designed to keep us alive in the next 2 minutes, right? So you can think of it, and this is super simplistic, but I think it's useful to think about it this way. We have our survival system, and then we have our higher brain, right? And you could think of your survival system, that's the brain that we share with animals, with even going back to, reptiles. You might have heard of this. Part of our brain is referred to as the reptilian brain because it's, it's kind of the same. So we could say lizard brain, right? So we have lizard brain, survival brain, and we have our higher brain. And when we're in survival, we are literally operating from our survival system, from our survival brain. And if we think about that, that's, again, very brilliant, right? There's nothing wrong with this. We were designed that way. When we're under threat, survival system takes over because survival system is really good at keeping us alive, to reacting, to just staying focused on exactly what we need to do in order to survive the moment. But it's so limiting because survival brain doesn't have access to any of your good ideas, your creativity, your impulse control, your awareness and your thoughts about your long-term goals. All of those things are functions of your higher brain, right? These are higher executive functions of the brain. Survival brain doesn't have access to any of that. And so it's a totally different life when you're thinking about how do I do life from survival brain versus how do I do life from my higher self, right? Survival brain sees everything as a threat. It sees everything as impossibilities, right? It's just full of, nope, that wouldn't work. Nope, shouldn't do that. Can't do that. It's such a limiting experience, right? And it doesn't have the access to the beautiful, loving, emotional part of you. And so obviously, we're going through life when we're living survival brain, we're cut off from the greatest part of us, right? The greatest version of ourselves is when we can have access and be functioning from the higher brain. That's where we create genius, right? And it's in us. It's not that it ever goes away. It's just if we're engaged with survival system, the higher brain is just kind of hanging out there, taking up space. And so it's a very limiting way to live, right? So one of the most important things that we teach in the academy and that is important for all of us is to be able to regulate our nervous system, heal the wounds of trauma, and switch out of survival brain into higher brain, right? That is it's key. And it's also very important to do that if you want to affect any kind of change in your life. Because when we change, what's happening is that we need to create new neural pathways, right? The new neural pathways that support the thoughts and the behaviors and all the other things that we desire. We need new pathways in order to do that. But if we are in survival brain, the part of our brain that creates new pathways is not on board. So you can go through and bang your head up against the wall every single day. Like, I'm trying so hard to change these habits. I'm trying so hard to think differently. I'm trying so hard to do these things and I'm getting nowhere. There's a really good chance that it's because you don't have access to the part of your brain that is able to create new neural pathways. So it's incredible to understand, right? Sometimes when we've been stuck in a place forever and we're wondering, why the heck have I not been able? I'm putting in the effort, I'm putting in the hours, I'm doing all the things and not getting anywhere. Survival brain doesn't change, right? Change is very dangerous to survival brain. You've heard of self-sabotage, you've heard of, resistance, you've heard of all these things that keep people stuck. And it's really a function of this. Survival brain is your self-saboteur. Survival brain is the part of you that is afraid to move beyond where you are. And we're never going to beat it into submission and say, you're coming with me. And no, we don't win against survival brain. We're not supposed to, because we would have died off as a species. Nicole.
The other thing is that the unresolved emotions that we have associated from the trauma, that's actual energy. It takes energy to suppress all those emotions, like in PTSD or whether you're just having dissociation, so that you don't have the energy to move forward. And so, you try working on yourself to get over and move forward in life, but you're spending so much energy that you don't know about, suppressing all these emotions that you're not willing to deal about. And that's what fosters disease and illness and health challenges and obstacles and all that other stuff, because your body's trying to keep it back in your subconscious and not affecting your life now, but it's still there because nothing is ever destroyed. Everything has to be transformed into something. So if you're suppressing it and you're not transforming it into growth, and you haven't worked on it, you haven't had therapy, you haven't worked through it, you haven't transformed it, then it's still there. It needs to be processed out.
Right.
That's why.
Absolutely. And there's so much that you said there. And one of the analogies, I guess, that I use to help people understand this is, you have a certain amount of capacity every day, right? Right now, as we're sitting here, we all have a certain level of capacity, and it's like a bank account. Okay. We have a capacity account. There's money, hopefully, in our account, right? And everything that we do as we go through the day costs us something. And we can make deposits as well, right? We can make deposits and that may look different for everybody. That could be through being in nature, going for a walk, listening to music, movement. I mean, doing your somatic experiencing practices. I mean, there's a big list of things that feed us and put deposits into this account. But there are many, many things, right, that cost us capacity dollars, currency on a day-to-day basis. Even getting up, deciding what to wear, and making breakfast, do all the things, right? And some things are more expensive than others. And one of the things that is so expensive that we often don't even understand is what you're talking about, Nicole, which is keeping all the stuff that we had to pack away at the time that it happened. And that was a really good idea. But keeping it stuck, keeping it under lock and key is a tremendous capacity cost to us. And the way I describe it is, sometimes you spend capacity, but you get something for it. You might spend capacity by doing your workout, but you get a benefit from it. You might get, use capacity to show up here in this meeting, but hopefully, you get something from it. But using your capacity to keep everything stuck and hidden away is like driving down the road with your window down and you're just flying your money out the window, right? It's just going for absolutely nothing. So when we can really start to understand that, we can reclaim that capacity and use it to process these old things. Another way I like to think about it is, when those things happened and we kept that energy, because everything is energy, right? Everything is energy. So when those events happen and we didn't have the resources or the capacity to deal with them at the time, they're stuck in us, kind of like, sometimes I'll say like an apple or something like that, and and it can grow and be inside our body. And so we can start to metabolize that apple bite. We could take bites out of it over time, right? And be able to actually diminish and transform that energy into something useful for us, right? And relieve that. And when we do, we can start to gain more and more access to that higher functioning that makes us who we are and allows us to live the life that we were meant to live and overcome unwanted behaviors, change patterns, think the way that's in alignment with who we want to be and what we want to create. So it's just such a foundational piece to be able to recognize what were my personal traumas, right? And they'll all look different. No, nobody can stand back and decide for someone else, oh yeah, that was a trauma. We don't know what was, what overwhelmed any given particular system. Now, sometimes things are really, horrific. And we're like, yeah, of course, right? That was obviously traumatic to that system. But there are a lot of subtle things in everyday life that we want to start to understand the impact that it had on us. One other way that we really see trauma showing up is when these events happen, right? And they are just wired into us so deeply, we're going to make a story that's consistent with that, right? And that makes sense. So for example, and this is just one of, we could think of thousands of examples, but in a situation where a child isn't given the care that they need. And let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, that they're in an environment where the parents really put a lot of value on success and doing things perfectly. And they're doing it because they want the child to have a good life, to fit in the world, and to, be able to be successful. So with all good intentions, right? But often that comes across to the child like they can never do enough and they're never okay, right? So that might show up in ways like, the child brings home a B+, and the parents say, oh gosh, what did you get wrong there? Okay, we need to work on this and this and this. And while there's nothing wrong with helping the child see where they got, where they made a mistake or something and helping them grow, very often it's done from a place of, oh no, this is bad, we have to do better, right? There's always the possibility of doing better. And when that happens, very often the child trying to make sense of the world will take on the story, unless I'm perfect, which is impossible. So they're just setting themselves up for a lifetime of frustration and, the inability to appreciate themselves. They say, unless I'm perfect, I'm not lovable. I'm not okay. Whatever the story is. So you can imagine, with our varied lives and experiences, how many of these different stories we created to make sense of the world when we were little. And then that's like constructing a pair of glasses, putting on a pair of glasses through which we see the whole world. So for example, I have someone right now working with whose father was so demanding. It was always, how can you do better? You have to follow the rules. Everything has to be perfect. The rules seem to always be changing. And it was just a really stressful environment where it felt like, unless I do everything perfect, I am not going to be loved. And just setting up the nervousness all the time. Oh my gosh, I'm going to make a mistake. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm supposed to know everything, right? Even from a young age. And so now the way that it shows up in life, one of the many ways that shows up in life, anytime there's any type of, I don't want to even say controversy. I might just say anytime someone expresses disappointment, like, oh, you went to the store for me and you got the wrong thing. that's not just a small blip on his screen. It is life-threatening. His brain, because of, the story that was created, the glasses that he wears, goes into a panic about, she's going to leave me. She's going to take her love away. Right. And we can see this. He is aware, like, oh, this is my survival brain telling me, how to protect myself. 70 years later, 65 years later, and still be in a space of it really feeling real. Nope, they're leaving me. They're going to take away their love because I got the wrong thing at the store. So you can see how our traumas cause us to put on these glasses through which we see the world. And it's really hard once we've collected all these experiences our whole life that prove these things true, right, in our minds. It's really hard to untangle them. So it's crucial that we understand where these things come from so that we can move beyond them, so that we can do the things that will heal them. And there's a number of things that we can do. Some of it centers around the events themselves and some processes that we work with in order to create a new story from that event, right? But the thing that we're talking about today is how do we start to release that energy that was created and is now stuck in my body. And that's one of many beautiful things that somatic experiencing can help us do. And, there's a process to using somatic experiencing for the different things that we use it for. And so with respect to how do we use it to help us heal past traumas, there's several stages, and it wouldn't be appropriate or responsible for me, but by Michelle, for me to, dive right in and give you some advanced somatic work for dealing with trauma. That would be irresponsible on my part, because we want to tread carefully, gently into those spaces. And so I mention that because I want to give you something to take away and to start to play with today that I feel very comfortable is safe as a starting point, right? But I do want you to understand that there's so much value and so much possibility in using somatic experiencing to really be with old experiences that are essentially trapped in our systems. That's not something that that I recommend, just jumping in, diving in. I'm going to give you the top 3 things to do, right? That's something that needs to be handled with a little bit more tenderness. So, and that is something that we work in the Academy to make sure that we're helping your system, right? And being gentle, not just sending you into traumatic things without the skill set and without, being essentially ready for that kind of thing. But what we can do is just start with some of the really gentle pieces that we start all of our somatic practice with. And I would say the first thing, though, there's a couple of things I want to invite you to think about in your own life. What were some of the events that really stand out to you that still have that sting to them? Those things that you recognize, wow, I really remember that event. And it doesn't have to be that you remember the factual aspects of it, but that you remember how you felt, or you remember things were different after that point, or that felt really bad or scary, or I don't know how I felt, but I know that it was an intense situation for me. And start thinking about some of those things and really seeing how they may be impacting your current, today's behavior, today's nervous system. That would be a really great place to start. And then with respect to somatic experiencing, you've probably heard me say, I wish I could rename it and make it somatic communicating, because that's really what it is. It's so much more about just opening to the experiences of your body, to your internal world, to what's going on in there, than it is trying to create something or even experiencing something. We're not out there, we're not in there, I should say, trying to create a certain XYZ. We're actually in there to explore and to acknowledge and to be aware of our internal world. And so with respect to, how to bring somatic experiencing in a very gentle way, in that kind of first stage way, is checking in. You can ask yourself, when you think about these events in your life, where do you feel it in your body? So for example, maybe in the client that I was referring to before, we could do a practice in which, remember bringing home a report card and standing there in front of his father and feeling the anxiety about, what is he going to say? Am I going to get in trouble? Is he still going to love me after he looks at this report card, or, whatever the event is? And then ask the question, where do you feel that anxiety in your body? Maybe it's a constriction in the heart, a knot in your tummy. For me, it's always, almost always, in my belly. It's like either a brick, feels like a brick, or a falling kind of sensation. It could be tightness in your jaw, your shoulders. It can be a ringing in your ears. I mean, literally the possibilities are endless, and there's certainly no right or wrong way in which you should feel something. But getting in touch with that feeling, right, and where it's located in your body, and then using either your hands or pillow, something that feels really supportive. So if it's your belly, you might wrap both of your arms around your belly. Maybe try left on top first, then right on top. A little bit firmer pressure, a little bit more gentle pressure. Might hug the pillow. Maybe just a hand. Maybe one hand on top of the other, right? And experiment a little bit to see what feels really good. Where do you get that feedback? And it doesn't have to be relaxing. It doesn't have to be, we're not doing this to get rid of the feeling, right? That's important to understand. A lot of times people will say, well, it didn't work. It didn't get rid of the feeling. When in actuality, what we're trying to do is soften the feeling so that we can stay with it and allow that anxiety to actually be felt. Because in the moment when he was standing there in front of his father, feeling that, he went into some shutdown, right? That was too much. He couldn't handle it in that moment. The fear of not being lovable by the person who's in charge of taking care of me is terrifying to a child, terrifying to a child. So he shut it down, stuffed it somewhere in the body. And now we're actually trying to feel it, right? And that's why sometimes we have to be kind of ginger when we're going into these things, because these things can be intense. But we use our somatic practice in this way to try to soften it enough that we can sit in it now. And we may only be able to sit in it for a couple of minutes. And that's okay. And that's why I use the example of the apple, because we can think of it like taking bites out of the apple. We don't have to swallow the whole thing or bring up the whole thing all at once, right? We can have many sessions where we take some of that energy away, and over time metabolize what's there. So I want to say just a couple of things about trying to make sure that this feels safe for you, right? Number one, I would never invite you to go into your biggest and scariest things at first on your own. right? Maybe try some of the things that you recognize. Well, that was a thing, but it wasn't the biggest thing on my list. Let me go into those kind of experiences first, get my feet wet, get to know my internal environment, try these things on, and then kind of work my way up over time. The other thing is sometimes it's important for us to set safe containers for this work. So if you are going to be, bringing up and remembering and trying to process some feelings from a difficult event, have a safety net. And by that, I mean, if it starts to get really overwhelming, we do not want to push ourselves and be like, nope, I got to feel the whole thing. Otherwise I can't get rid of it. And I want to hurry up and get rid of it. So I'm going to push myself. Really, we're traumatizing ourselves if we're pushing too hard and going into things that really just overwhelm the system more. So you can see how it's not productive, right? So we might need to set some containers for ourselves. And by that, I mean, maybe setting that, 2 minutes. I'm just going to go and I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to support that part of my body and just allow myself 2 minutes to feel that anxiety. And then I'll come back to it depending on how that feels. It might also be helpful to have the safety net of having somebody that you're going to reach out to. Somebody that, you may even share, hey, I'm going to do this process. It might feel kind of overwhelming. Would it be okay if I reached out to you afterwards if I'm feeling a little shaky? That could be something that's helpful, that safety net. You can also make sure that I start people when they're building a somatic practice. One of the early things we do is learn how to find your safe island. So your safe island is a series of exercises or a place in your body that feels safe, right? It might be grounding your feet, putting your feet flat on the floor, feeling the earth underneath, supporting you, grounding you in. And that way, if part of your body feels really chaotic or the situation starts to feel really overwhelming, you can focus in, get back to your body, to your feet, feel grounded, feel secure, feel supported. And it's important to think about these things before doing some of these more intense exercises, right? Because you want to know right where you're going to go if things start getting a little funky. And to be gentle with yourself. If you start to visit an experience and it is a lot, and it's you have a lot of tears or a lot of emotions around it, but there's a part of you that says, geez, that was such a not thing. Like, why are you being such a baby about that? Or why are you making such a big deal about it? That's none of that has a place, because at the time, right, and when you experienced whatever it was that you experienced, you had certain resources, you had certain things that led up to that, right? Because it's never about just the event. Things accumulate over time. So being gentle, allowing it to be okay. If that was so intense for you, it was so intense for you. It doesn't do any good to try to tell yourself that it shouldn't have been, right? It just was. And so this gentleness, also having your safety net and like a safe container in which to visit some of these events, was very helpful. And letting the experience be whatever it is, right? And remembering we're not trying to chase these feelings away. We're actually trying to make space for them. And the parts of us, right, that experienced it. When we can metabolize these experiences and integrate them, right? Right now, we're trying to hold them off. Like Nicole was saying, we're like, you stay over there in my subconscious where I never have to see you or look at you, right? But when we can bring those parts in and embrace them and integrate them into the whole of us, then we feel like a whole person, right? As opposed to feeling fragmented and like we're not, all of us isn't welcome. So this is a kind of a high level discussion on, you know, how to use somatic experiencing to work with past trauma. And there's certainly a lot more to it, but I think it's very useful for us to just start to thinking about, you know, what has trauma been for me? And what are some of the things that I might want to be working towards with respect to allowing these experiences to finally be metabolized? With that, let me ask you guys if this makes sense, if there are any questions about how to go about it for you, if it brings up, you know, any level of anxiety or fear around, you know, opening that door. That's something that I totally understand why that would be maybe a little bit nerve-wracking. Like, what will I find? Will I break down and not be able to get back to, you know, will I be dysfunctional? These are some of the things that can make it hard to stand in that place and really recognize and start to take actions with resolving our traumas. Oh, yes. Hello, Anna. How are you, my dear?
I'm good, thank you. So, since you asked, one thing that, and I'm sure one thing that you said today that really struck me that I'd like to understand even a little deeper. You said like when we experience our emotions and like we want to give time to be with it, like that the point for me today was the intention is not to try to get rid of the emotion. So is it what we're trying to do is just calm our nervous system enough so that we can be with the emotion? Is that what the intention is? Because I have to be very honest, my whole preference is to get rid of it, and all of these programs that I do has always been with the intention to learn how to get rid of it. So I just wanted to, if you can just highlight that a little bit more for clarity.
Excellent question. And that is, it's such a good point. Everything we've ever been taught has been how to get rid of it, right? Even as kids, we're never taught how to be with difficult emotions, right? It's always like, how can they make us, oh, you shouldn't feel that way, or oh, don't be a baby, or it's okay, have some candy. Right? And sometimes it can be really well intentioned. Sometimes I give the example of, you know, a little boy who doesn't make the soccer team, and his mom, you know, trying to, oh, her heart is breaking for her son, and so she might say something like, you know, oh, it's okay, we can still go to the park on the weekends, and your friends will be there, and you can still play soccer, and there's next year, and you know, and it's all very lovely, very well intentioned, but it doesn't actually make space for the disappointment, right? And the hurt that the child is feeling in that moment. And we learn through these examples, oh, you know, got it. This disappointment that I'm feeling, I shouldn't be feeling it. It needs to be chased away. It needs to be something that I, you know, don't deal with. And we're never given the skills to sit with it. But if we don't sit with it, if we don't feel it, then it is stuck in our bodies, because that emotion, that disappointment that child felt is energy. And when we don't feel it, we stuff it. And, you know, we stuff it in a lot of different ways. So maybe in that situation, you know, kind of the ideal might have been something like, oh man, yeah, this really sucks. I can imagine how disappointing this is. You know, it's gonna feel that way for a few days, and I'm here anytime you want to talk about it. And you know, whatever we can do to make space for these emotions. And until we do that, it's gonna stay stuck. And so our goal really is to sit in these hard things, sit in insecurity, to allow ourselves to feel uncertain, allow ourselves to feel whatever it is, anger, sadness, all the kinds of hurts. It doesn't mean we're going to stay stuck there, right? And there is a point at which we need to move ourselves out, right? But not until we've metabolize what's there. We can stay stuck in those ruts. And so one of the skills that we get to learn as we learn about our emotional resilience is, how do I know when that point is where, okay, I think I've felt the energy of it, I've metabolized the energy, and now it's just really an emotional addiction, or it's just me not knowing what to replace it with. And that's just, that's a skill like anything else. But yeah, we were meant to feel our emotions. And so you're exactly right. When we're bringing in the somatic experiencing aspect to feeling our emotions, we're taking the edge off enough. We're calming our nervous system enough to feel that threat, because that's what it is, right? These intense emotions are like a threat. And so our nervous systems have to be somewhat regulated, somewhat calm in order for us to do that. If we're already super hypervigilant and feeling anxious or whatever it is, we're not going to be able to sit in more of that, right? That's not going to be something that's available to us. So the support piece allows us to feel safe enough to feel these things. So I hope that makes sense. It's a great question. And yes, you have it exactly right. We're supposed to be feeling them. Yeah.
Isn't that similar to, that sounds very similar to self-soothing? And that sounds like something that is encouraged when we are infants.
Yeah. So with self-soothing, we don't come into the world knowing how to do that, right? We are not capable of self-soothing. We learn that behavior through our well-attuned and securely attached caregivers. And they teach us, they do that for us first. And it actually creates certain wiring in our brain that allows us to go forward and do it. So sometimes we didn't get what we needed in order for us to create that wiring that allows us to self-soothe. So there's a lot of us who learned ways that are maladaptive for soothing ourselves, because we didn't have the modeling that we needed in order to figure it out when we were young. But the beautiful thing is, it's not too late ever to create that wiring and to be able to learn how to self-soothe. It can be more difficult as adults because we can't cry and say, pick me up, right? Take care of me in this way so that I can learn how to self-soothe, right? We're expected to be independent and have that stuff figured out. But we can learn how to do that for ourselves. And calming our nervous system is certainly, it is basically self-soothing, right? In a lot of ways. So I think self-soothing might go a little bit beyond that, because it's about recognizing our needs and taking the actions to meet them, right? Because that's what the attachment and the attunement is when we're babies. It's recognizing my needs and meeting them. So yeah, they're very interwoven and important aspects.
Another thing I just want to touch base on is, I think it's a little more challenging for men to self-soothe, because they're supposed to be macho men, the breadwinners, and they're supposed to be the providers. And
Yeah, they're not supposed to have emotional needs.
no,
Right?
they're not at all.
Yeah, exactly.
They're machines.
And they don't have as many spaces like this, right? Where they can come and be open about that and get support in that arena. And it really is something that, it's too bad. And hopefully over time we can change some of that and recognize, and they can embrace that part of them, so that they can then be more effective in accepting themselves and working with their own emotions. Yeah, I would agree entirely. Anna, how did that answer resonate? Does it make sense?
Yes, it does. And I had a follow-up question.
Yeah.
It's kind of a like circling up everything that you've said today and what all the other comments of the other attendees has been today as well. It did make sense. I was wondering if you could clarify or comment on then what the cycle of the emotion is. And what I mean by that is, so you've explained that we have this emotion and we do the somatic practice to be able to get our nervous system to be able to be with the emotion.
Mhm.
So if the idea is not to get rid of the emotion and it's for us to learn how to be with the emotion, but in a state where it doesn't overwhelm us or all that, then what is the purpose of being with the emotion and what does the emotion serve us and what happens to that energy of the emotion when we are able to stay with it? Does
Yeah.
that make
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that. So, our emotions are good, right? And even the ones that are intense and we don't feel comfortable experiencing, they're still really valuable and they clue us in to our life, to things that we need to know. So, sometimes our emotions, like let's take anger, right? Anger can be an emotion that alerts us to the fact that, hey, something's not working for me, or maybe someone's treating me in a way that is not the way I expect and should be treated, right? Or there's an injustice happening. So it's good to be aware of the emotion. And then we can step back and we can, with our reflection, since we're not afraid to be in the anger and to be witness to it, we can kind of step back and ask it, what is it here to tell me? What do I need to understand through this emotion that is healthy and important? Okay. And from there, it may lead us in a couple of different directions. It may, as I said, alert us to an injustice, either being done to ourselves or to someone else, that we need to take action to resolve it, right? We need to set boundaries. We need to remove ourselves from the situation. We need to take whatever action is necessary to try to resolve it or to protect, okay? It may also bring up something entirely different. It may show us, reveal to us that we have a limiting belief or something that is created, sometime in the past. Let's say it's, let's say the emotion is, irritation at somebody. Right. And so we have the chance to sit back without judging it and just look at it. Oh, what is this irritation here to show me? Well, it may be showing me that somebody is acting in ways that it's not appropriate to me and I need to set boundaries, like I was saying before. Or it might be showing me that I feel insecure about my own ability to XYZ, do this job or be a good mom or, whatever it is. And so the irritation is actually showing me, hey, I have some limiting beliefs underneath that I get to look at and resolve, and when I do, I'm not going to feel that irritation anymore. There's a lot of emotions that it's not that we want to or our goal is to stop feeling, but there's a lot of emotions that we experience every day that we actually don't need to. There's a lot of insecurity, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of all kinds of things that if we can see the underlying thought pattern that is causing the emotion, we can work on that thought pattern and then we're not going to feel that emotion anymore. So the purpose of the emotion itself is so valuable for us to be able to step back in a non-judgmental way and say, oh, what is this emotion here to teach me? Do I have some work on myself that I need to do? Or is it some action that I need to take? And in that way, our emotions are our compass in life, navigating us, helping us know where to go, right? The same way, like our really desirable emotions, our joy and our contentment, our all of those things are teaching us, oh, go this direction, right? But it doesn't mean that the undesirable or not enjoyable to feel emotions are bad. They serve a very important purpose as well. And that's where, you asked the question too, where does the energy go? I don't think I have a great answer for that. I know that it's no longer stuck in the body, right? I can imagine that it's used when we actually feel it, that it's used to fuel either our action or our work to undo the belief, the thought patterns that are fueling it. Who knows? Maybe it's like, the Grinch when his heart grew all those sizes that day when finally felt those emotions. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I've never seen it discussed. I've never really come across where does that energy go. Interesting to think about though, when we think about, nothing is ever destroyed. It's just kind of, goes into the mix. But I know that it's not being held in the body and creating disease and that feeling of stuck energy. Yeah. So does that answer these questions?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's really beautiful. So what I hear you saying, what I got from everything that you said, just like there's an intelligence that guides our nervous system because the nervous system is communicating with us, like you said, you would call it somatic communication, I think you said, or communicating.
Yeah.
So our emotions are communicating with us as well. Yeah. So you clarified that well. And just while you were talking now, I just want to share my thought. Like it just came to me, you were saying about where the energy comes and goes. I was thinking, well, I would imagine the energy just goes back to wherever it came from. And so just like it was dormant before it was needed to communicate, once it's activated because it needs to communicate, just like everything else in life, when we're hungry, we eat, when we're sleepy, we sleep, when we're you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so perhaps that energy is just a dormant energy like all the other energies that gets activated when it's needed. And when it's done its job, it goes back to where it was, which is dormant, ready for whatever. And in the mix, I guess it's supporting us like in the parasympathetic, like the rest state. And then the other thing that I wanted to say was just, it's kind of like it's all good. That's what I'm getting from all of this. Like it's just all good. So the thought, like you were saying about checking your thought, the thought that I would have to work on is that thinking that emotions are terrible and they're horrible and I should just be happy all the time. So thank you for that. It's quite clear to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for this input. And I love this idea, that it's kind of dormant. It's almost like kinetic energy, right? It's that's in the spring, ready to spring and release when it's needed. And that is right. There's such a beautiful divine order to everything when we stop judging and really just look to understand and to flow with that. So thank you for that. Yeah. What a good discussion. You guys are amazing students today, just really, understanding this and digging a little deeper. So is there anything else as we wrap up today? We can certainly, if there are additional questions, we can always, hit this topic again with the questions that you guys have about it, because I think it's important and it's a pretty deep topic, obviously. So we're just scratching the surface with this, but I think we've done a good job of kind of laying a little bit of a foundation, and then with sharing some ideas for how to take it forward and start to work with it.
I was just telling you in the academy last night about my doctor took away my sleeping pills, so my post-traumatic stress nightmare, I had one about my ex-boyfriend, and I actually woke up with a heart racing, covered in sweat, bawling my eyes out, and I had to calm myself down. And I was afraid to go back to sleep, but then tell myself I'm safe, this is not happening now. I had to put on, I did the VU exercises that, like you do in the academy to get my heart rate and my breath under control. I put meditation music on.
Mhm.
and to get myself calm and regulated. So, if you go into your trauma and something comes up, just to, find those somatic exercises like doing breathing, doing meditation, calming yourself down, because sometimes when you bring some of your trauma up, it'll come up in your sleep to work things out,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
good to have the tools, to use the tools to say, okay, this is a memory, this is not real, even though my body thought it was real. I was back there 30 years
Oh,
ago
for sure.
as real as day, because it wasn't processed. So to my mind, it's real because it hasn't been processed.
Right, right. Yeah. And you're so wise to remind us, like I was saying, for us to have safe containers, for us to know how do I get myself back to safety, right? We don't go wading out or wandering out 50 feet away from shore if we don't have, the whatever it is that's gonna help us get back. So that's an important aspect, and I want to be careful to make sure. And so if you're somebody who's working with traumatic events, and consider making sure you have those things in place, that you're feeling steady before you go in and start working on things. Yeah. Thank you, Nicole.
Okay.
Well, it was great to be with you guys. As always, I appreciate this. And those of you who are watching the replay, we appreciate you too. Please let us know what questions come up from this, or, what your experience was, so that we can help guide and inform this process as you take it forward. Yeah.
Oh, one question. Am I gonna get my credentials for the academy?
Absolutely. I will go in right now. Congratulations for being making this beautiful commitment to yourself. And I'll go in right now and just double check everything and make sure that you get access right away.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I look forward.
Congratulations. It's amazing. I've been in the academy, and it's helped me immensely with the support they both bring. They both bring their unique abilities, and the spirituality, the mental, the emotional information, and knowledge that the two of them have together. You also get the group support of the group, and the group coaching calls, which is so expansive, and just them holding the highest vision for you until you can hold it for yourself. So it's going to be amazing for you.
Yeah, thank
Beautiful.
you. Last year, I really learned a lot about boundaries and values, and like really dig deep into boundaries and how many they are and how many values there are, and just how important it is for us, especially if we're mothers
Yeah.
and women. It's very important for us to put ourselves first. So I'm
It's a beautiful
still
statement.
continuing.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you,
Congratulations.
guys, all of you, and I look forward to next time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next time.